Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the Ball State Center for Professional Selling webinar series, where today we are privileged to have a Ball State alum, Steve Iskender, who is also the Chief Growth Officer of a little-known company that you might actually be hearing more of in the future, if not you have already heard about it, a company called Driver Reach, and who's going to share with us some of his thoughts about what is the role of a Chief Growth Officer and where does the sales function fit in the job of a chief growth officer, and where does marketing fit in a B2B organization. And so Steve is going to share a lot about his ideas and thoughts about how a company like Driver Reach is growing rapidly by using new methods and techniques that tries to combine what marketing does together with what salespeople do as well. So again, looking forward to this talk. And Steve, once again, thank you for taking the time to talk to me and our audience.
Hey, thank you. And good morning, Ball State. Pleasure to be here.
Chirp, chirp. Isn't that what they say? So Steve, help me understand. Driver Reach. This is a company that when you came into my classroom and you talked about Driver Reach, I was really intrigued by what Driver Reach does. So for the audience who have not necessarily gone in and taken a look at what Driver Reach does, tell us a little bit more about Driver Reach.
So Driver Reach is a recruiting management software system for heavy regulated trucking companies, or trucking industry, I should say. The easiest way to think about it is that we're the mobile apply now button that trucking companies put on their website to attract more drivers, making it easier for them to apply, and then kind of move through the funnel fastest. So we're a full CRM functionality with two-way text messaging, email functionality, marketing messages within the platform as well. And then we can do all the regulatory reporting out of the system through our integration partners. We make it easier for carriers to attract more drivers and then focus a lot of our effort on better recruiter experience and driver experience for that.
Fantastic. I love this. So essentially, if I understand this right, so is it right in understanding that you have two kinds of customers? One is a customer is actually the companies that you want to work with that are looking for these truckers. And the other thing, of course, is to make sure that the truckers come to your website so that they look at you as probably, registering with you guys. You see what I mean? Is that something that you take a look at, or is it so regulated that the drivers don't have that much of an issue?
So our customer, the person that pays us is actually the carrier pays us and not the driver. Mm-hmm. But we see it as both from a user interface side of things, user experience. It's really important that the carrier has a flawless experience through the hiring process with the driver. And then for us, it's the driver experience. So we spend a lot of effort on the development of making it as easy as possible for a driver to apply, and then making that seamless, because abandonment rates of an application are so high. Companies have spent so much money marketing to these drivers to get them to their company website. Mm-hmm. The last thing you want is the driver to abandon because the application is difficult to fill out or clunky. So we focus a lot of it on the user experience from that standpoint.
Indeed. And tell us a little bit more about, without necessarily naming your competition and stuff like that. So what is a typical business model that your competition has?
So we're a bit different than our competitors. There's a few of them in the scene. We're a bit different. Our sales, from the sales side of things, we're all inside sales. So we have five sales reps today across three different departments or divisions of sales reps, I should say, or levels. Let me call them levels of sales reps. And then we're all inside. So we sell exactly how you and I are communicating today. I figure if we put a man on the moon and communicate, we can do it through a webinar or through one of these Zoom meetings across the country, where I believe all of our competition still goes door to door, knocking on doors every single day, trying to sell their product. So we went into an inside model of doing everything on camera, both from a sales and from a customer service or client success side of things.
Wonderful. So one of the things, is the fact is that people always talk about the fact that your customers are usually very reluctant to change, right? That's the common perception about why we should not change a good thing. If it's worked for us in the past, we should not touch that and everything else. To what extent that was a factor really that you considered saying, how are we going to grow Driver Reach? Are we really necessarily shooting ourselves in the foot? Are we going to have an issue later on in terms of how many customers we get, how quickly we ramp up? How much of that factored into your discussions in the early stage when you decided on your sales model?
But, you know, it is always, I think, with us in any business, it's the whole who moved my cheese. And people being reluctant to change. It's just the nature of business in general. So we looked at it, but fortunately or unfortunately, I should say, there's a huge driver shortage today. So
Yeah.
it's really easy to have a candid conversation with a prospect and just ask them, do they have open trucks?
Yeah.
Is what they're doing today, is it working for them? And the answer is typically no. So you almost have to convince them that, well, what you're doing, you answered the question yourself. You already said you have trucks and they're costing you thousands and maybe hundreds of $1,000s a month, depending on the fleet size, because these trucks are opening. You're telling me what you're doing today isn't working, so why not give something else a change? Now, I think on the surface that makes a ton of sense for customers. You know what, that does make sense, and we should give you a try. However, what you're here is that they're scared to change because so many of the people in the industry have tried other things and it sent them backwards. They work
Indeed.
so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard to fill the one truck, and maybe they have 50 open trucks, but they're scared to have 51 tomorrow because they changed to us and they didn't do everything. So we try to put a little bit of assurance and things in there. We focus a lot on the customer experience in general, from the overall journey of what our marketing and advertising messages are, to what our salespeople are saying, to what our experiences of customer services, to really give them that full comfort that when they come on, we're going to be able to execute on every single thing that we've told them. So it's no longer a sell; it's more of a explanation of how we're going to be able to solve the problem.
But Steve, it's still, the reason is what you're talking about is making sense. So essentially what I am taking from here is the following. There is such a shortage of drivers that the customers in this case would look at any opportunity to understand how they can solve that issue, to the point that they're willing to go out of their comfort zone and talk to a new player where you're not even taking the effort to send them a salesperson to meet them face to face. But the problem is so pressing that any person who can provide a solution, they're willing to give it a shot. But of course, once they give it a shot where you're not physically visiting them, because that's what your competition does, right? Is you blow them away with your experience. That part I understand, that once you get them in. But for me, the key thing is that changing that behavior of a logistics person sitting and talking to a salesperson face to face, for them to take that leap of faith and say, I'm going to talk to one more, for lack of a better word, annoying phone call.
Yeah.
Right? And that for me is that bold step that you took. So really for me, help me walk through that point where you really made that decision to say, we are not going to go with a direct sales force. Because for me, that is critical, because the argument, and this is just not for your business, it's for every other business that has to rethink its sales allocation efforts between a direct sales force as against a sales force that is still there, committed to the customer, but actually without necessarily physically visiting the customer.
Yeah. And I don't know, am I any less trustworthy that I'm on camera with you right now versus sitting on your doorstep right now?
Well, for me, but that's one of the things which I have learned to live with it. But for example, for people, let's say, for example, I'm a logistics player. I'm a logistics person, and I'm not one, and I deal with salespeople day in and day out. I'm used to that fact. I'm used to the fact that somebody's out there. And if I can talk to them, I can shake their hands. I'm not saying that that is true all the time. I can shake their hands. That's a person, that's a real life person sitting in front of me. And I can build better. I can see the body language. Sure, you can see part of the body language in a call like this as well. But to a large extent, it's a fundamental change from how things have been done in the past. So I'm more interested in really how was that choice. So was it purely monetary based, saying that, listen, having a field sales force is going to be very expensive. Mm-hmm. And what we're going to do is that we're going to take a chance. We're going to try to take a look at how we're going to grow with, you see what I mean? Because your competition is doing that. For me, that is what for me is really interesting from that hard choice that you made. Or it might have been easy, but still, you know what I mean? Was it just a financial part of it? Or were you also saying financial is only one part of it, but I think my customers are ready for it?
Yeah, it is. It's truly, I don't want to say evolve or die. Yeah. The way that businesses are going in general. I think that not all companies are able to accomplish the non-door-to-door, the outside sales rep, to be able to get rid of that and stay inside. But as we position ourselves as the leader, the thought leader in the industry, the more modern and progressive,
Got it. Yeah.
How I think sales calls will work in the future, or demonstrations will work in the future. There's no longer a need for me to show up at your doorstep and do it anymore. So hey, we push technology and we push innovation on things. We say, hey, to be able to do that, we need to get out of that traditional model of quote sales and go into the on camera.
I think it's really fascinating. I don't think half an hour is going to be enough for me to actually dig deeper into even understanding the psychology of your customers, the first customers that you had who actually made that leap of faith saying, okay, here is a new upstart, there's a new player out here, which is looking at a different way. And then if you're doing everything online, can I trust you? Because if I see you face to face, because that's what I'm used to. I think it'll be very, very interesting to, at some point in time, to talk to some of your first customers.
Yeah, God bless them.
Yeah, but that's great because one of the things which always struck me was the remarkable growth that you had, right? That you're having a remarkable growth. You were one of the first to take a look at this new way of platforming and selling this to your customers using a new selling model as well. And you've seen remarkable growth. And that is something that for me is very curious because you needed to have, and one of the things that you mentioned in your talk as well is how the power of making sure that word of mouth as well, right? So you're going to have a lot of your customers who had this, but for the word of mouth to happen, you needed to have that first one customer, the second customer who had to say, I'm going to take a leap of faith. I'm fed up with the kind of proposals I'm going to get from these salespeople so that, hey, here is a new player. My problem is so big. Let's give them a chance.
Right.
So for me, that's essentially what is really, really cool. But again, I don't want to get sidetracked. There's a lot more I would like to talk to you about as well. So the Chief Growth Officer. So tell me about what is a normal routine. So when you took on this role as a Chief Growth Officer, what were the different things on your plate at that point in time?
A lot of my time spent twofold, kind of in the operations and the sales side. I think most people typically put Chief Growth Officer just in sales.
Yeah.
They actually don't realize that there's actually a lot of to do the growth or execute on it. First, there's the writing of the strategy, both for sales and operations of the organization, and then implementing that strategy throughout the organization. Kind of twofold. One I put kind of in the bucket is writing the strategy operationally in sales, how we're going to execute on it, because without sales, operations fails, and without operations, sales fails. So the write the strategy on how they co-mingle together, and then execution of the strategy within the organization. And I think that's a lot of the key of what I work on the day-to-day is not just organically within the organization, but inorganically, and how do we use our vendor partners, or as we explore channel partners in the industry to really grow the organization. So again, a lot of my time is spent on, strategy, writing the strategy of the organization and the direction, and then execution of it.
Indeed. And as you become bigger, which is inevitably going to happen, right? Do you really think that you will also need to have somebody dedicated in terms of sales and somebody dedicated in terms of operations reporting to you so that you can go and, you see what I mean? Because when you grow, it's nice, you can do a little bit of both, but then what's going to happen is that you're going to grow. When that happens, do you envisage a separate sales organization and a separate operations organization with both of them reporting to you as a Chief Growth Officer?
Yeah, so that's exactly what we're doing today. So about 30 days ago, I brought on a director of sales, so a long time, friend and acquaintance. I served on another board of transportation with him. As the founder, Jeremy, also was on that board of directors with him. This 10, 12 years ago, the three of us were all serving the same board of directors in the industry. Brought him on around 30 days ago, has a ton of experience in transportation and side of things to really run the sales force. Because although I say we have 5 today, we have 5 more. Actually, one just accepted this morning. So
congratulations. Yeah,
thank you. 4 more sales positions that are open that I intend to fill in 2019. I also just hired a director of client success to take over the client success.
Yes, indeed.
Wow, and said, both of these roles should report up through me, because I kind of see from where I sit kind of in the office, I like to be able to see both sides of it, because I understand how, and let me take one step back. Half of my experience is in operations, half of it is actually in sales. So I'm 50-50 split since I've graduated on what the time I spent in operations, time I spent in sales. I like to be able to sit from where my office is and be able to see how a decision in operations or client success impacts sales and the vice versa. That handoffs, if the handoffs aren't flawless, or what the messaging is that client success has, might did it differ from what sales is saying. So I like that both of those positions today now will report up through me. So client success director starts here in a few weeks.
Because it's very interesting, because right now one of the topics of what we're doing research on is the concept of customer success. In fact, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be doing a webinar on the concept of customer success, client success. But the reason why I'm saying that is the case is that it's also catching the attention of a lot of academics as well as the concept of client success. But when you say operations, right, because for me, the way I'm seeing this, and that's something where you can correct me on it as well, is actually there's three people that have to report to you, because what you're going to have is in my head, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have operations just really got to do with the user experience, right? Is designing the user experience both for your customer side of it as well as the driver side of it. And how do I do this? How do I make sure that it's linked to their CRM system or to your CRM, the ERP system, your CRM system? How do we do this? A lot of that is very, very operational, right? But in between is the customer success, because in my head, the customer success is actually a mini you, which is what I'm saying is that they have to have one leg in sales in terms of the handover, as you said, but the other leg has to be in terms of how do we make sure that based on the needs of the customers, when we do the onboarding of our customers, that we need to make changes to the way our platform is structured to make it much better. And you actually have a team of operations actually doing that part. You see what I mean? So is that something that you see that eventually that the client success will morph into an operations part and a sales part, because you will need that too?
Yeah, so today our development work reports up through our CTO. So our CTO and I collaborate, almost every single day. We have joint meetings with our client success department every single week on feedback we're getting from the platform. Because I think one of the worst things, right, is to solicit feedback from customers, especially early adopters, and then do nothing.
Exactly, yeah.
So, between CTO and I, we collaborate on what those are. Does it make sense what they're saying? And then how do we improve that user experience, or just maybe even just the onboarding experience?
Yeah, indeed. So it's absolutely fascinating. So I look forward to seeing more of that as well as you progress. So tell me a little bit more about the growth that Driver Reach has enjoyed since its inception. So tell me about what has been the growth rate. Has it been double-digit growth rates, or has it been triple-digit growth rates? You see what I mean? So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it gets in people ask percentages. It's, I started in January of 2018, and we were 3 or 5 employees. Today we have 24 employees, 10 open positions that I intend to fill in 2019. So in the next 6 months, I believe we'll have those 10 positions fulfilled. We're now expanding across the nation from a labor side of things. I just hired our first 2 remote employees, so one down in Georgia, one up in Minnesota that just came on from a remote. So we're going from a growth strategy is talent acquisition is part of the growth strategy. It's not just all about sales. Indeed. So sometimes the best people aren't just in our backyard, they're anywhere in the nation. And again, now we're communicating through camera and phone.
Indeed.
I should hire across the nation.
Indeed.
From 2018 till today, it's astronomical, the growth side. It gets into these crazy percentages you start talking about. We had a handful of customers, and we're up 15 or 20 fold just since from 2019. Since January, we've doubled the business since January.
Wow!
And I think that we're going to double again between now and the end of the year. I would be shockingly surprised if I didn't double the business again between now and the end of the year.
Fantastic. Now, when you took over so essentially the fact that you were chief growth officer, you took over the job, you had 5 people within the organization, and tell me about the mandate that you had from, I hear the term Jeremy, I guess that is your CEO and founder or co-founder. So tell me about the mandate that you had as a chief growth officer.
So from an organization standpoint, Jeremy, he's the CEO and founder. He owns the place, and it's extremely visionary on things from a product development side, a marketing strategy. I mean, he is definitely the mastermind behind a lot of that.
Yeah.
For me, it's I focus a lot of the effort on customer-centric model.
Yeah.
Customer's always right, but a customer-centric model and looking through the lens of a customer back at us in everything that we do, from a marketing message to our sales presentation to our demo to how they're onboarded to what our software looks like. If you think of customer-centric that way, that's what's going to make us win.
Absolutely. And so it's wonderful because when you took over the job, you're looking of customer centricity, and you said something which I really like. You talked about marketing. And I know that I've had the privilege, and it really was a privilege listening to you talk about how marketing truly helps drive sales within your organization. I'm not taking away from the effort that a salesperson has to put in to land the customer, right? But the fact is that the effort that, the kind of success that you've had in terms of marketing driving sales truly talks about how you've utilized marketing to help drive your sales organization as well. The reason why I'm saying this is that a lot of times when we work with a lot of companies, B2B companies especially, and I say, what is marketing? I hear things like marketing is a black hole, money goes in, nothing useful ever comes out. Marketing spends all the money that we work so hard to bring in. This is from sales, by the way. This is what they think of marketing. And tell me about that fact about all the marketing things that you decided that you're going to have to help, because you're going to have a limited amount of salespeople, right? You're going to say, we're going to go against our competition where they're going to go knocking on door to door. They have a different cost structure, but they also have more feet on street. And if you're going to be sitting and calling, and essentially, if you talk about how a customer does not like to pick up the phone and answer the call from people they do not know, tell me about how marketing played a role in helping you have the right kind of sales organization.
Yeah, so it's I say it starts with a different philosophy of a marketing being a division of the company or your partner in the company.
Yeah.
So I truly see marketing as our partner within the organization. Marketing and sales, everybody says that they have to complement and work together. Well, I mean, this is glue. I also oversee our marketing side of the company. Jeremy's extremely visionary on what the messaging is on that side, but they are truly partners in it, because we're not ever going to be able, from a sales team, be able to call the customers or prospects and in front of all of them. And we're not door to door, just like you said. So our marketing messages in the avenues that we go to market or advertise, because I think there is a clear differentiation between the two, is really important to us. So we use different channels. I mean, everything from, we do our own webinar series. So twice a month we do webinars. We're in all the major trade publications. We have a PR firm that is on retainer that gets us lots of publicity from that side of things and announcements. We're heavily involved in the industry. Jeremy sits on numerous boards within the industry as well, some of the largest that are out there, including myself. I've been around for 15 years and been on some of the different transportation associations out there as well. So we leverage that. So just our involvement in the industry is fundamentally different than our competition. From a lot of them didn't have to do anything, and they were just out there and they were just kind of thriving on the shortage, going along with the ways. Today, we try to make sure we're more of a visible, seen company, that we're not just here to sell them software. We're really here to partner with these companies in solving their problems. So it's a lot of how our marketing message is, how we construct that message and put it out there, and how we even our own views of being at the different trade shows.
I love this. So what I'm hearing is two things. One is, of course, the marketing part of it is actually your personal brand, because you talk about Jeremy's personal brand and your personal brand. That's one part of it, right? Yeah. The other is kind of the paid marketing towards PR firms and stuff like that. That's great. But what I'm also very curious, which is actually, it goes into the gist of it as well, is that a lot of times where your customers might not necessarily be aware of who you are, or they're not necessarily looking at the same kind of outlets where your PR is going for it, but it's purely based on messaging that you come up with in terms of inbound marketing, getting lists and using that, or people come to your website out of curiosity. So talk me through that part about how you use different kinds of inbound marketing techniques. That is to actually use whatever you have. So webinar is one kind of inbound, right? Any other kind of stuff that you use to actually get traffic in?
So from an inbound lead gen side of things, outside of trade publications, I think those are the easiest sides of
Yeah.
it. But there's an inbound lead generation side of our business
Yeah.
that a completely separate side. It's a repository of termination records, and through that repository of termination records, it allows us to be able to see just about every trucking company out there, or different carrier or company that hires drivers. So every time a driver fills out an application and it says, these are all the places that we work, well, now we see every company that has hired
Indeed.
drivers. So now it becomes a lead gen from that standpoint as well.
Indeed. And then you come up with your kind of proactive campaigns to actually have them, having messages and stuff like that so that it gets the curiosity. Now, one of the things I want to ask you is how many of these messages in your inbound or lead nurturing kind of stuff, how much of this is actually becoming video based, essentially sending video messages? There's a big now trend towards saying that we should be leaving video messages for our customers. Is video messages something that you also see becoming an integral part of what your sales reps do sometimes, or even you recording a video for your customers and saying, call us back?
Yeah, so, again, I go back to Jeremy. Jeremy has a quick 30-second video that he puts together that we've shared. We've done a little bit with one of the local software companies here in town, sending some video messages on it. We saw a little bit of an uptick on it. We temporarily paused the video messaging on different reasons, and are now going back to video messaging, specifically through like a LinkedIn channels.
Yeah.
We've come up with a couple of kind of spoof videos and some little, some fun things that we stick out on our website every once in a while that capture people's attention and the right comments on. But we're just now starting to go back into video, exploring how video what that does, what it means to us. Are we able to, what data are we looking for from a video?
Yeah.
Are we just looking for advertising from a brand recognition, or do we actually think it's going to create inbound lead gen where they're going to, you're going to draw them into our website, they're going to fill out a web form or click on.
So we are looking into, from our side, we're looking into a kind of a video messaging to train our students on. And it's actually pretty interesting because that's what I'm realizing right now is that there's a video message where if my contact opens the message, I get notification that they've opened it, which for me, when I leave a voicemail, I would never know that if they actually listen to the voicemail. And the nice thing about this is that the software that we're working with, this is not me plugging that software, is more that you can actually even have links to your content. And you can even keep track of, did they open your video message, but did they hit on that link so that it's more qualified so that you can hand it over to your sales reps to have a little bit more warm qualified because they've actually taken a look at not just your video, but also your content. So I'm sure that those are the kind of things that you're going to be looking moving forward in terms of the kind of saying if there's going to have traction with this as well.
Yeah. And for us, people say, this is all good and all this growth and things are good, but I'll tell you, there's challenges that come along with it. Is that lots of companies, especially new ones, are all about new inbound lead growth.
Indeed.
We have a lot. So that is one of our
exactly. Absolutely.
People say, why don't you do more? Well, more is not always better. We've learned, we started with 2 sales reps and just now started to scale through our SDRs and AEs. So we just brought on the other 3 sales reps. So they're brand new on the street. So we've done all this growth with 2 sales reps.
Indeed. That's what for me is amazing, right? And the fact is that, and that's one of the things that I actually asked is, it must have been to have such explosive growth to then realize is that for us to go with 2, it's impossible because the leads that you're going to be getting are going to be so immense. I'm assuming that's how you've done your analysis to say how many number of salespeople that we want to just keep kind of pace with all the leads that you're getting, right? So what is your typical sales cycle time?
18 days is the optimal time that we do a demonstration and make initial contact to close.
Indeed. And are you working with any kind of sales cadence platform to make sure that your sales, you know what I mean? If it's 18 days, sometimes you have to follow up and stuff like that. So do you work with companies like VanillaSoft or SalesLoft or any of these companies as well for sales cadence?
No, so I've looked at a couple of them. I've looked at SalesLoft actually a few times, and today we use just our basic CRM, HubSpot. Jeremy's been an adopter of HubSpot since before people even knew who HubSpot was. So follow the HubSpot model from a predictable revenue, Aaron Ross We follow lots of their books and podcasts on things. So we look at that from a cadence standpoint. I'll meet with the director of sales today to kind of make sure that we're going through the cadence, because today it's different when we were new and we had no analytics behind anything. We didn't have any. Today I have analytics on what drop-off rates are and
Indeed.
what is the optimal time and what.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's absolutely fascinating, because that's, for me, is that the cadence side. And the other question I have is that when the moment you have the people, your sales reps, so I'm talking of your inbound sales reps talking to the customers, to what extent do you now start looking at enablement platforms for their sales enablement, right? So essentially, what kind of questions should I be asking them? Is there any kind of sales enablement platform that you're feeding off, or is it just basic training? You know what I mean? Or is it onboarding of your employees? So how do you actually get your employees quick onboarded, as well as adapt the conversation in line with who I'm talking to on the customer side?
Yeah, so it's done through training today. We're not using a sales enablement platform. We've looked at one here local that we like a lot. They're good for them. They say that we're not a fit for those guys. So, right, they figured out their demographic, and they said, I don't fit their demographic because we're not quite large enough of a sales team for the sales enablement platform. So I always find it curious when companies, or interesting when companies say that we're not a fit.
Yeah.
Although I think that we are a fit. So
especially if you're going to grow,
and we're building our sales force with bench strength through an SDR program to kind of hybrid account rep program before they become an AE or an account executive. So because of that, that gets them into that more of that scripting. They understand the questions.
Got it.
They need to ask from a discovery standpoint to really do a good due diligence to make sure it's a fit on both sides, because, right, we're no longer new.
Absolutely.
All business isn't good business.
Absolutely. And is that something where you see that, okay, so it's nice that you're learning through the process, so you're looking at this, but then when you go from 5 to 10, and I'm sure it's just a matter of time, 10 is going to become 15, 15 is going to become 20, is that you're going to start looking at a very clear onboarding process, which is based on the success of the first 2 or the 3 employees who are out there who had to learn the hard way. And do you have plans of actually doing things like peer coaching of your SDRs? You see what I mean? And is that something that you see moving forward in terms of enabling your newcomers to be onboarded much faster than when you had the old timers?
Yeah, so I think that my vision from a sales side of things is, first, before we bring on a customer, they have to check certain boxes for us.
Yeah.
And it is truly you do not pass go, and you cannot sign this deal. Yeah. They do these things, even if they're waving money out at you, and that's a bit different of a model than most companies, right? Someone wants to give you money, you take it, is what most people say. Today, we're a little bit different. We say we're not going to. We need to really solve their pain and understand what goals we need to accomplish for them, what success looks like. From a sales side of things, I do think that we would hire an SDR coach or an SDR training manager versus kind of the hand down effect that's happening today. I haven't done it yet today. We consult with a lady that does some of our SDR training for us today, mainly because I want us to stay very nimble. We're a very tight-knit organization. We can move in time. It's one of the things that I pride ourselves on overall, kind of globally as an organization, is our nimbleness. So as things change or evolve, I want to be able to move pretty quickly within the organization without adding a lot of layers of management.
Actually, what they're talking about right now is that there's new work by an enablement company. It's a big word called Saleshood, which is they talk about enablement mastery, and I think that's a very nice way of trying to look, and where he talks a lot about the author talks a lot about things like peer coaching, which I really like, especially in the role of SDRs and BDRs. But then part of the onboarding process is, as you get new people in, is that yes, you have people outside coming and training, but how can people practice pitches? How can they actually go and record themselves and then get their other peers to actually come and say how they would do it differently? And they could also have peer coaching in terms of different stages of the sales process as well. So how do I talk to a customer for the first time? How do I talk to them when I'm talking to them on the second time, trying to convince them about, say, for example, the pricing offer? So they talk about peer coaching. And I think it's very interesting as you grow that you will see that you might want to take a look at, okay, if I don't want to order too many sales managers, but then how do I get peer coaching so that ultimately what you want is your people up, going out there, and then going out there and winning as well, right?
Right.
And I think that's one of the things. A couple of questions, and I think I really have to make sure to let you go because your time is very precious. Is there's a lot of talk about gamification. I know that you have your 5 salespeople strong, but is that something that you're also going to consider as you become bigger? Because gamification is where you want to make sure that you want to make it fun. Because luckily for you, you don't have a lot of cold calls. You actually have people coming in, you can do it. But at some point in time, you want to use gamification as a way of keeping your people motivated. You see what I mean? It's saying, okay, if you hit so much targets, you see that kind of stuff. Is that something you plan to look into, like Hoopla and other kinds of things?
Yeah, I've been a part of organizations that sent me on trips and
yeah, so that's indeed, right?
And even my director of sales has been on lots of these exotic vacations that have been earned. I think maybe there could be something coming down the pipeline that we would explore on that side of things. I have mixed thoughts on it. Is that truly what motivates you? Is the vacation, or is it the trophy on the wall? Maybe that's what it is. So I think that as we see the demographics are changing in the workforce, motivation in the workforce is changing. I'm not sure that that's as relevant. I say these big trips or Rolex watches are as just overall recognition and appreciation. We're fortunately, we just got nominated as one of the top finalists for culture in Indiana of tech companies. So you might have seen that release. So really try to do that from a camaraderie side of things. I think that's a lot of why people come to work for us now. Is it's no longer the 3 vacation days that you won. It's the, hey, I just want to be a part of this culture and this environment.
Actually, so what I was talking, what you're talking about is what we call in sales academic, but the rewards of it. What we're talking about is actually more about the intrinsic motivation that they're likely to get, but based on games like Hoopla. So, for example, every time they ring a bell, they say ding, 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 it goes off, and then essentially, you see what I mean? Managing a people through gamification, the reward is okay. What they're going to get is a different thing. So you can come up with different kind of rewards, and you can analyze about that. But this is more about how do I manage my people using a gamification. The idea is that everybody likes to play video games, right? So why can't we make sales as like a kind of a video game? And at a later point, I'll send you a video recording that we had with a company that deals with SDRs, but it's more like 50 to 60 SDRs, where they use gamification tools like Hoopla to keep the employees motivated. The reward is, of course, what they're going to get. You can decide what that is going to be, but that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring up the bell. I always talk to one of the SDRs. He was actually our first SDR, and we have a scoreboard out there. It's a huge glass window.
Yeah.
And they kind of keep score, and they love to update it.
So that's gamification, right? So except that, okay, you don't need to have a tool, but when you start having remote people, it might be interesting for you to start thinking, okay, how do I take a look at how do we make this happen as well? So again, that was just my curiosity. And one last thing before I let you go, Steve, is client success. This, in my opinion, is extremely, if we take a look at LinkedIn, so essentially we were doing a lot of research on client success or customer success. And we saw that the fastest growing job needs requirements on LinkedIn, the third highest was actually customer success or client success, especially in a kind of a software as a service kind of business such as yours. Huh? What made you decide that you needed to have a client success? And what, in your opinion, are the benefits that a client success team brings to your organization?
So starting with my thoughts on client success in general, it's fundamentally different than customer service. People thoroughly confuse them.
Yeah.
And even the applicants that apply thoroughly confuse the difference. So I will ask people what client success means to them. To us, and I'll explain, to us, client success is truly making our client more successful.
Absolutely.
Not answering phone calls on resetting passwords. That's customer service. Client success is, I'm going to show you tips and tricks to make you hire more drivers. And if you do Y and Z, I can assure you that this is the outcome that will come. That's really what I focus on from a client success side of things. So we focus a lot of effort on that side, but again, that customer-centric side of things, because from a client, you've purchased something in the past. I don't want to say that they don't care what a sales rep says, but it's actually the execution of what the sales guy sold, right? And that's client success. they have to feel comfortable with the client success onboarding manager and what that is like onboarding and through the entire journey. So I think that it's almost more important than what the sales, because customer acquisition costs are so high. Just hug the customer that you have versus trying to chase after the next.
Yeah, absolutely. Indeed. And absolutely. And I think this is really cool, because I think in the interest of time that we should have another call sometime later on, just discuss the benefits of having a client success in a SaaS firm, because it's going to be as important as your sales organization, because your sales can get in, but then if your customers are not convinced about the value, because you sell a value, but if that value is not delivered to the customer, and if the customer has any kind of issues all the way from onboarding to using it, then that's going to have a big issue. Or they might not use it at all, which would then come back when it's time for them to renew the contract. They say we never used it, but it's probably because they didn't do the job. And that's what we increasingly say, that client success, the difference between client success and customer service is the level of proactivity, in terms of how you, as a client success, you're much more proactive in reaching out to your customers. And in fact, holding your customers accountable for not using it right, because their ability to be successful depends upon their ability to actually use it well. So that's pretty much what we're increasingly saying as well. So Steve, thank you so much. And I think that in limited time that we've had, you've given us a wonderful insight into what DriverReach does, but more importantly, how you are looking at different kinds of technologies, but with the main idea of technology is only as good as the customer-centric strategy that you have. And essentially, I'm sure that me as well as every other person who's going to watch this video wishes you nothing but the best for you and DriverReach as you grow as well. So any final words for our audience?
Well, thank you. Again, thank you for having us on, DriverReach considering us, and thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure talking with you and speaking with the students. So again, appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much.